Now, in today's landscape, brands are no longer just selling products and making money. They're expected to take a stand on social and political issues. And this shift, which we call brand activism, reflects a growing expectation placed on brands that they engage with the world around them far beyond their bottom line. But what does it mean for a brand to be truly transformational? And how do we disentangle authentic activism from woke-washing? And that's what I want to talk about today. What's the difference between brands making meaningful change and brands just making noise? In 2018, Nike featured Colin Kaepernick in their Dream Crazy campaign, and this was a defining moment in brand activism. This was not just an ad from Nike. It was a bold, unapologetic statement that really changed the way that brands were expected to engage with social issues. And from an academic's perspective, it really helped to define brand activism and distinguish it from traditional corporate social responsibility. So from this, in our research, we were able to conceptualize brand activism as brands taking a position through their statements, through their activities, in support of or in opposition to partisan issues. Now, what was interesting about what Nike did here was not that they engaged with a social issue. Brands and companies have been doing this for decades. It was how they did it. First of all, Nike took a bold stance on a socially charged issue. So by featuring Colin Kaepernick, Nike joined the fight for racial injustice and against police brutality. In doing so, they showed that brands are not staying neutral anymore. They're not absenting themselves from these partisan issues. But this move came with high risks and high rewards. Considering the controversy surrounding Colin Kaepernick in the US at that time, reactions were strong, reactions were divided. So for some consumers, they portrayed significant backlash and they engaged in boycotts. For other consumers though, this campaign, this connection with Colin Kaepernick deeply resonated with them because they believe that brands should stand for something. But third, Nike really set a new standard in corporate activism. So again, they were moving away from this soft cause marketing that we've seen in the past, where brands engage with these safe, sort of major consensus issues. What they did here was to really directly engage with public discourse. And it worked quite well for them overall, because it strengthened their brand. They were able to show alignment and authenticity with their brand identity. And overall, despite the backlash, they did see an increase in their brand equity and certainly in their cultural relevance. So with this new standard of corporate activism, we've seen a lot of brands integrating these tactics and moving into this new role of the brand. However, while many people praised Nike's efforts, they were also heavily criticised, and the key criticism was about them commercialising activism. So something that the Nike campaign did was raise the all-important question of how do we know a brand is being an authentic activist, and how do we compare that to those who are just harnessing this as a marketing strategy? So let's break this down. Some brands are genuinely committed to the cause, others are capitalising on a movement. And this is a typology that my co-authors and I have published, and it enables us to see what brands are saying compared to what they are doing. So not all activism is created equal. Now, looking first of all at the bottom half of the typology. So on one quadrant there, we have our silent brand activists. So these are companies that do actually embed meaningful pro-social corporate practices, but they remain silent about it. They don't employ an activist framing. So they might use ethical sourcing, they might have sustainable business models, they might have great policies in favour of employee welfare, but they are not using overt political or activist messaging. So this might be a company that does have excellent sort of labour rights policies, but they're not sort of getting engaged in social movements. And for those who work in the sustainability space, may know this as green muting or green hushing, where companies actually intentionally veil their pro-social or their sustainable practices, because that's not what they want their positioning to be about. In the quadrant with the question marks, we have our brands who are not engaging in any activist marketing messaging, and they're also not doing a whole lot about that. So these are companies who, again, they're just neutral, they absent themselves from these conversations, they keep their external positioning about product and profit. Now, as we move up the typology, these top two quadrants are the ones that are most interesting, that really got us interested in this research. So we have our woke washing brands. Now, these are the companies that have activist marketing messaging, yet there is no determinate track record of pro-social corporate practice. And perhaps the example that my students often bring to me when we talk about woke washing is about all of those companies that posted black tiles on Instagram during Blackout Tuesday, yet retained harmful and discriminatory workplace policies and practices. And then we move over to authentic activism. So here, activism is threaded deeply through their corporate practice and through their marketing messaging. This makes their activism credible and sustainable. Now, we can talk about activism and the authentic activists and the performative activists, the woke washers, but another question that we need to ask is, can brands actually try to drive societal transformation beyond activism? In some research that I have published with my co-authors, we have developed the dynamic capability of transformative branding. And this sees brands not only advocate for change or respond willingly to change, this is about companies who proactively create change and co-create change by working with their consumers, their employees, their suppliers, governments, local community, and even their competitors to drive transformation overall. So unlike traditional business dynamic capabilities which seek to drive profits and market share, transformative branding advances the idea that we can balance our business and social goals and seek to actually make industry change, which we hope would flow on to wider societal change. So this is very much about going beyond the brand and thinking wider about those changes. In our research, we say that this can happen through two market-shaping activities. One is leadership, and here I have Yvonne Chouinard, who is the founder of Patagonia, and Patagonia have already been talked about today, very relevant to our discussions. So what is unique about Patagonia and what relates to this idea of the leadership of transformative branding, it's about reimagining what a brand can do. It's about taking a longer term vision, it's about being attuned to shifting ideologies and just having a completely different idea in your mind of what a brand exists to do beyond making money. Now, Yvonne Chouinard has basically derided the idea that businesses can be sustainable. He says that is impossible. So instead, Patagonia has become a brand that is all about responsibility and solutions to environmental degradation. Perhaps one of their most famous campaigns is the Don't Buy This Jacket, which encourages consumers to buy less and repair more. But more recently, and certainly more radically, Yvonne Chouinard actually transferred the ownership of the company to two entities, ensuring that future profits will always go towards environmental conservation. And that was chosen over taking the company public or selling it privately. The second market shaping activity that we see as key to transformative branding, to really changing the industry and societal levels, is Tony's Chocolonely. And they are an example of what we call collaborative coupling. So it's all well and good for leadership to be re-envisaging what brands can be and what brands can do and what their responsibilities are, but we actually need to mobilize our stakeholders. We need to collaborate with them to drive that systemic change. And Tony's Chocolonely is the gold standard of doing this. They have their open chain platform, which enables them to work with suppliers and many other stakeholders, but in particular their competitors, to provide a roadmap for how you basically become a premium quality chocolate brand that has a fair and equitable supply chain where child labour and modern slavery is completely eliminated. And what I love about the Tony's Chocolonely example is they are actively eroding their competitive advantage. They are showing competitors this is what you need to do, because to them, making these changes in the industry is not just going to happen if they do it, they actually need to provide a roadmap for everybody to do that. So true transformation really comes when the brand goes beyond themselves. But transformation is slow and it's imperfect. So just still talking about this same example of Tony's Chocolonely, a few years ago, they were removed from the list of ethical producers, which is put out by a watchdog organisation called Slave Free Chocolate. The reason for this was that they were found to be partnering with a major international chocolate manufacturer that does allegedly use slave labour. Tony's Chocolonely responded to this by defending their decision and saying, we know that they use slave labour, and that's exactly why we work with them. We need to make change within the industry, within the system, and if we partner with an industry giant and educate them and inspire them and push them to have better practices, that's where that change can really happen. And they point out that purpose-led businesses really need scale to make change. But this does point out the reality, the uncomfortable truth, which is that transformation by brands is slow, it's imperfect, it's not straightforward, and it takes time. But this is not an excuse for brands to not take action. They absolutely have a responsibility to do more than just talk. They need to act with urgency, they need to act with accountability. When brands do lead and collaborate with purpose, this is where they can really change the rules of the game and the industry. So moving forward, the question is not really whether brands should be taking a stand on issues. We really need to think about how they can lead as activists. And I think we can all agree that that's not just through words, but it's through meaningful, radical, and sustained action.